Hey everybody, this is Daryl at 151 Farms, and today I have the distinct pleasure and honor of meeting my friends from afar. We've known each other online for years, and that is Sandra and Eddy Lepp. So, hi Sandra, how are you?
Doing good.
And with us today, we also have Matthew Hutchins. Matthew, say hi to everybody.
Hey, how's it going?
Matthew's currently fighting a 10-year prison sentence that involves 3 counts of psilocybin, MDMA, and what was the other one? LSD.
LSD, that's
So,
correct.
what do you do when you got a problem like that? You come over and see our old buddy Eddy Lepp. Eddy, how are you?
Hey, how are you guys today?
So,
Hope everybody's enjoying their weekend.
despite what the record may say, Eddie's looking pretty good. I got to tell you, I expected
Yeah,
it to be pretty debilitated, but it's tough for him right now. Eddie just had his vaccine. Is that correct?
yeah.
And that didn't go all too well. Which one did you get?
I got some Madeira. Uh, there were some side effects from the second dosage. Uh, Hearing loss.
Now, is that one ear or both?
I don't know yet. I'm going to be seeing a specialist about the situation in the next week or so. But I it's like my doctor was teasing me last week. He says, "You look pretty good for a dead man."
Well, you only had
And
3 months the last I started hearing you had cancer, so
Yeah.
you've
yeah, it
had
was supposed
chemo
to be
and
over in December, January
Yeah.
January.
at the latest. And I'll be honest, I honestly believe I'll be here next December and January.
Do you
But
mind showing our viewers just where the cancer has started and spread? It's in the brain, you're saying?
there was a large uh, mass of cancer up here that we radiated 10 session regimen. And then there was cancer in the upper right lung that shifted and moved to the lower right lung. And then there was cancer of the groin in the bone, not the testicles or anything, but the bone, because I had broken that bone. The cancer got in there. And I have the same problem on this side, and it seems like it's filling up my pelvic area and my hip bones, and I think it's in the bones now, but who knows?
Who knows? But
Well,
here you are
we're
in.
getting a PET scan next week.
So we're here at Sandra Lepp's house, right? Eddie's
Well, our
moved in.
house,
Yeah,
yeah.
your house. Your two are married, I know. And what regimen are you, in addition to whatever your doctors are offering, Eddie, providing for Eddie right now?
We give him 3 pills, and it's filled with RSO every morning, and then another 3 pills in the afternoon with RSO, and then another 3 pills in the evening with RSO, equaling about 3 grams of RSO a day. And then also in his cocoa or in his tea, sometimes another gram if he needs it. And a lot of people are saying, "Oh my God, you're giving him too much RSO," but in reality, we were giving him at first 1 gram, the cancer was still growing. We were giving him 2, cancer was still growing. We went up to 3 grams a day, and that's when we actually started seeing the tumor shrinking.
And how much can you say it's shrunk by? Do you know?
Yeah, the brain cancer has shrunk about 60%.
Wow.
The lung cancer has gone from 2 postcard-sized masses to approximately a silver dollar.
Okay.
And we're getting the scan on the hip area. Unfortunately, we're afraid that area is still active and might be spreading. So, from being terminal to now going to the
Oh yeah.
doctor, and they say, "Oh, well, come back next month, come back in a couple months." Even the doctors are going, "Wait a minute, you're supposed to have been dead. Why are you still here?"
So they have to be astonished.
No, well, I keep telling them we're using RSO, and they just want to write down at first that it's just the CBD, and
That's
I'm
the thing is,
insisting.
unfortunately, uh, Sandy, and she knows that I love her with all my heart and mean this in a very loving way. But this tenacious little bulldog bitch is the reason I'm alive, her and my daughter.
Yeah.
They don't let these doctors get by with anything.
Yeah.
So what are the
And
doctors? What's their regimen?
uh, again, it's not important for the message.
Okay.
Doctors tend to be focused.
But the reason I'm asking is sometimes the cure is worse than the disease, especially when we're
that's
talking.
Well, let me
point.
get into that just for a minute.
Okay.
So they've misdiagnosed. They've given him wrong medications. They've given him high blood pressure medication when his blood pressure was low.
Oh,
They've
They gave me radiation poison and a bunch of other things. But the point I was trying to make is that the reason I'm alive today is twofold. One is cannabis. Two is my support system. And my wife, my daughter, and Patty, my VA nurse, every one of them do all they can to take care of me. And like Sandy alluded to, they actually at one time had me on 3 different drugs that when you look up what are the 10 worst drugs you can be taking while on fighting cancer, 3 of the ones that I was taking were on the top 10 list.
and what do you attribute that to? Are they just lazy? Is it sort of like a systemic approach?
let me just say something about that real quick.
They're too focused.
I see.
The urologists don't want to see your shit, dude.
All right.
Well, here's
wants
a
to
big
see
part
your-
of
So,
it.
so that's a failure of our medical
Well, here's a
system.
big part of it right now. The VA system for him, he's supposed to be going through the VA.
Right.
But when the cancer hit, everything happened so quickly that we couldn't get approvals from the VA for everything he needed. So we ended up going through something called community care, which means we got to use the local facilities here because San Francisco's 4 hours away. We couldn't drive all the way to San Francisco VA to get him care.
Okay.
So what ended up happening was the VA doctors don't talk to the San Francisco VA doctors, don't talk to the VA doctors up here. They don't talk to the community care doctors. Their fax numbers don't even jive. So it's like,
That's inexcusable.
so
Well, yeah.
after
that is the
sending tons
problem.
of faxes from
The
one
problem
doctor to
is
the
there's
other,
no-
we found out his primary doctor hadn't gotten any of them from the VA and didn't know anything that was going on until I called him and personally sent all the documents.
Well, Eddie's always been a fighter, and based on his stance with medical cannabis and what he fought for years, he's paid the price.
Yeah.
He's actually been, the
Yeah.
pit bull amongst a lot of us who would sit here and argue these
Yeah.
things, but never have our voices heard. Eddie's voice
Yeah.
has been heard. So what we're seeing today with the cancer and how he's treating it is just a further manifestation of his drive to see this plant get its rightful place in a human cure for many of our ills. And with that, I would ask Eddie, what do you feel about Prop 64? Now that it's been 4+ years, how do you feel the legislation that was passed that controls taxes and regulates recreational for-profit cannabis? What has that done to our industry and the legacy growers such as yourself?
Well, on the one hand, there's been a huge amount of growth, a lot in the cannabis industry. Prior to my honey, tell him I
got
do
it.
not want him to leave until
I
I
got
get
it.
a chance to show him that stuff.
I got it.
I forgot it completely and totally. My train of
Well, you
thought.
were talking about how medical, or now that 64 is legal, it's overtaken Prop 215.
Okay.
It's been better it's enlarged the industry essentially.
I didn't say it was better at all. So
No,
please
my mistake.
Do not infer that I did. 'cause
Okay,
I
I'm not
hate
saying that. I realize that.
But it's like I said when I got out of prison. If what it took to get all of those changes made was me going to prison, come and get me. I'll go back and do another 10 years. I swear to God, I would do it in a minute if I would see as much progress in the industry as a whole. The problem is, and 64 is what allowed this, they did away with the people that made the industry
I would agree.
and replaced it with people that instead of being driven by love and compassion and kindness, understanding, a willingness to give and wanting to make the world a better place all got brushed to the side. And now it's all these, it's money people.
Did you know this going in when 64 was being voted on? Were you a voice that challenged people to at least understand the language that was in 64?
Yes and no. You have to remember when that was going on, I was approached by several different entities, both in support and against it. I don't really have a position officially on 64 other than I was against it. I didn't care for it. I thought that 64 pages was entirely too long. And I tell a little story, and I'll tell it again because it bears repeating. There was a lady that lived with me for many years. Her name was Erica, and she has 3 wonderful sons. They were all from Iowa, little bitty corn-fed farm boys. And we brought them out from Iowa to California to be able to live around their mom. So the boys and their dad moved out here. And they stayed with us for a few weeks till they could get a place of their own. And one day they were sitting in the front room with me, and Pierre, the youngest, who was 8 years old at the time, wanted to learn how to roll joints. And I always kept a Coca-Cola tray with a couple ounces of pot and 500 rollers on it, and pretty much to help yourself. And so I told him, I said, okay, I said, I'll teach you how to roll, but I ain't gonna do it for free. And he says, oh, and I said, no, you gotta pay for it. He said, well, what do I gotta pay? I says, you have to gain knowledge.
Yep.
I said, you've got to learn. And I said, if you learn, it'll all be perfect. I said, okay, so what do you want? I had a copy of 215 sitting on the coffee table next to us.
And that was how many pages?
Half.
Yeah, 3 or 4.
2.
No, half.
Really, a half page.
You can print, depending on the size font, you can print all of 215 where it's legible, where you can read it.
Right.
On half of sheet of
Beautiful in its simplicity.
Yeah,
and you were essential, or you were an element at least in the development and passage of that.
Oh yeah, very much so.
And you worked closely hand in hand with Pebbles Trippett and Dennis Barone.
Oh, no, not Pebbles so much. Dennis and we were right out of downtown Frisco. I mean, I was in the club 2 and 3 times a week.
Nice.
But
then you look at 64.
Then when 64 came in, it did away with the people that, like I say, their hearts were full of love and compassion is why they did it.
The medical legacy growers and so on.
And now it's all influenced and taken over by the big money people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I have no problem with. I like money. I like big money. What I hate to see is any money, even a little handful of change, frivolously pissed off.
Or monopolized. For example, under 64, are you able to grow enough plants to treat your medical conditions?
No, we can't grow what we need under 64. We're limited to 6 plants in a little squared up area that's 10 by 10, and that's per house, not per patient. And they don't even have a patient clause in our county where I could sign up as a caregiver for an extra 10 by 10 area for his needs for his cancer.
And here we are, it's May of 2021.
And I can't grow what we need, and he has stage 4 cancer.
And he's going to have a birthday coming soon.
Yep.
So Let me ask you, how has the enforcement been up here? What are you
It's
dealing
terrible. They have helicopters flying so low I can see the color of their socks. I wave at them.
with? They're that low.
Oh, super low. They shake the whole house. Yeah, it's
And then
terrible.
this is a modest property. It's not like you'd be doing, 1,000 plants here.
I used to do 6 plants in large containers, and that was plenty for me. I can grow 6 large plants. I can do what I need for myself. If I could have 12 large plants, it would be plenty for me and Ed. Unfortunately, the 10 by 10 area that 64 requires is unjust. Number one, because people with disabilities can't even fit in that area with a wheelchair. And number two, because if you fence up that area, you're not going to get the sunshine you need, and you'd be lucky to grow 1 plant in that area.
And that counts as clones and veg and everything, yeah.
Everything.
So it's just ridiculously...
People don't understand it because people haven't read it. I've read that proposition at least 8 times from beginning to end. And I highly suggest everybody do that because most people have never read 64, so they don't even know that they're limited to 6 plants per house.
But don't...
Indoors.
And that's my
It doesn't
thinking.
even allow you to grow outdoors. 64 allows cities to ban patients from growing outdoors in the sunshine.
Right.
How dare they? How dare they?
Well, that's the thing. It's a medical catastrophe right now. And the way it is with your doctors and what you just illustrated, if they're not communicating, if they're keeping us on opiates, these homeopathic, naturopathic remedies need to be available for us. And in your case, does it being Eddy Lepp factor into this? Are they being particularly...
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing. We're in the same area, same county, so I just have to make sure I do everything super legal and by the books because I don't want to be targeted.
But they targeted you originally when it was
yeah.
your church.
Well, yeah, it's like I said earlier. When I was busted, they never even sent a cop next door to find out if my neighbor even had a local permit.
Nothing.
They never even talked to it.
So they were targeting you.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, yeah, they took every plant on my property and left 28 or 14, I think, 15-foot plants in his yard hanging over my fence. They had to drive under them to get out.
Wow.
But to get back to the story I was telling earlier, I started twisting up some joints in a little pier, red 215. And I said, all right. I said, I just showed you how to roll it. And I said, I'll teach you and help you, till you get good at it. And by the way, he's very good at it now. But that was years ago.
Well, you had a master teacher.
Yeah.
Anyway, I said, okay. I said, what does that say? And I wasn't his dad then. I was just, Uncle Eddy, and we didn't even know each other real well. So he was a little gun shy. Well, I don't know, Eddy. I think it says that if you're sick and your doctor says it's okay, that you can use cannabis without getting in trouble and going to jail. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, what else? That's it. I said, okay, thank you. I just wondered to this day, from that day to this day, why in the fuck the goddamn 8-year-old from the middle of Iowa, they can't spell pot, let alone cannabis. That kid didn't have any more idea what marijuana or any of its pieces, functions, or reasons. He knew nothing about it. But he knew what the hell 215 meant.
And 215 had its problems, wouldn't you agree? I mean, with additional legislation, some of the things that
215 in and of itself is flawless.
Yep.
Where the problem came in was the goddamn legislators,
That's
as
before 20.
always, felt they had to put their goddamn nose in our private business.
Yeah.
If you read 215, it's very, very clear. If you have a doctor's recommendation, you are exempt
Yep. From prosecution.
from the criminal prosecution. They changed it to no, you're not exempt. It's a defense.
Yep.
Well, what if you don't have money for a lawyer?
Yeah.
Right. And you did have money for lawyers. You were represented by Tony Serra, amongst others.
No. This was my state trial.
Oh, see.
But the point is that if an 8-year-old can understand it, why in the hell can't all of these goddamn politicians with 8, 10, 12 years of college and all of these legal backgrounds and all of this wop, we're the top 1% shit.
Yeah.
Why don't they get it?
I believe it's an attempt to monopolize the plant and keep it from the people through excessive legislation, vis-a-vis like the difference between federal and state laws continues to this day to be a conundrum, one that you faced and one that this young man right here, Matthew Hutchins, is facing when it comes to the LSD, the psilocybin,
there should
and the
never
MDMA.
be, under any circumstances, whether it's drugs or murder or rape or bank robbery or anything else, a citizen of the United States Republic should never, ever be put in a position where they can go to the state, beat the case, and then be tried again by the feds. And that's the problem with especially the drug laws right now.
It's a double jeopardy.
Well, yeah, even if you beat the state, there's nothing that says you ain't going to get ate up by the feds.
Right. And that's the situation Matthew Hutchins is finding himself in.
Exactly.
Because he was caught with how many pounds of cannabis?
It was about was there like 20 pounds of flour, and then there's about 40 pounds of trim.
And was that even listed in your charges?
It was not.
And you were busted on an undercover operation that involved Department of Homeland Security.
That's correct.
So, I mean, you don't try to deny the fact that you were engaged in this, but the fact is you were engaged in it for primarily the medical benefits. You didn't get involved with methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, none of those.
No, and there was the judge called me a greedy parasite when I was being sentenced.
A federal judge.
Yeah, a federal judge, and I said this to my lawyer before, and the public defender, and he said, "Oh, well, we can't say that because that sounds confrontational." But my whole thing was, look, if it was all about the money, why wasn't I selling heroin or coke? That would have been way better money. Like the mushrooms, a lot of times, like I was breaking even like on gas money and stuff, and that was, and it honestly felt kind of like a public service, and that's kind of how I looked at it.
I hear that over and over, and now that you've met Eddy and you understand his story a little bit, what does it mean to your generation what this generation did before you?
Well, until this whole experience of everybody reaching out to me and letting me know, like, look, there's history behind this. Isn't just pop into being because people were tired.
Yep.
It really kind of puts down a roadmap of,
Yes.
Like, this is how you have to go about it. You can't just roll over and
Can't roll over.
give up, because nobody's going to come in and say, oh, well, we're tired of things happening. You have to say you're tired.
And the justice system kind of eats people and chews them out. So in your case, you were given a public defender. You were encouraged, let's say, to change a not guilty plea to a guilty plea.
To an open guilty plea, no less.
No.
Whatever they decided to hand down, I was accepting without even seeing it.
And now that you've met a fighter, like not only for his physical ailments that he's battling, but historically what he had to battle with medical cannabis and the fact that he had a lot of patients relying on you. Eddy was doing it for the right reasons, and he did not waffle. He stood up to the charges, he dealt with it, and wasn't ready to take any kind of plea agreement or deal. He stood up and he's here today, long after he was expected to be gone.
Well,
Here's Eddy.
2 weeks before I came to prison, they met with me and told me that if I gave up the name of the people that actually took care of the gardens for me, that I could work out a deal where I wouldn't have to go to prison.
Oh, my God.
And I said, you want me to put my children in prison?
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
No.
So what do you recommend now that you've had a chance to meet Matthew? How should he deal with this going in? What's your best advice to him and other of his generation? Long after we're gone, what's their best option in handling this, Eddy?
You may think this is kind of an indirect answer to that question, but in all honesty, it's not. Live your life by 4 principles. The truth. No lies in and no lies out. Respect all. That means respect all of God's creations. And that means everything from you and me down to the dumbest rock on the planet. If God created it, respect it. Hurt none. Hurt none simply is a reinforcement of 2, which is respect all and hurt none. That means hurt none of God's creations. Whether it's you and me or a rock, don't hurt them. And last of all is love one another. Fill your heart with love. There's a saying that if you're looking at the sun, your shadows fall behind you.
That's lovely.
Don't dwell on this shit.
How do you recommend the youth of today deal with law enforcement? I mean, he actually was pretty open. He thought he could negotiate and deal with them directly.
Well,
What's your response to that?
That's bullshit. You cannot trust the cops for any reason.
They're not your friends.
They are not your friend. They will fuck you over anytime, anyway, anyhow. They do not care. They are there for the numbers, the prestige, and the power. They don't care about you at all.
So if you're in their radar, what don't you do?
You just shut up.
You shut up. All right, so we got that. What about lawyers? What's your advice on lawyers and hiring counsel?
My advice would be the same as it would be for anybody entering into anything. Let's say you want to be commander of the armies in the United States, okay? We got the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Do you think those guys, if you ask them about the history of American warfare or naval warfare, do you think they know the history from here back to the Civil War?
Likely not.
Probably not, yeah.
And history repeats itself.
You're a fucking fool.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll tell you why. The commanding generals of our armies can tell you every goddamn major victory made going clear to fuck back when man drew the maps on a goddamn cave wall. That son of a bitch don't want to die. He wants to live, and more than that, he wants to win and conquer.
So
he learns his history.
Your recommendation is educate yourself and the rank and file.
Learn your history.
And what about the cases? Should you be involved? Should you be paying attention to what your lawyer's telling you to do? Should you understand the implications?
Again, you have to take care of yourself.
Yep.
The public defenders are not there for you. Your attorney is not there for you. What everybody has to understand is to become an attorney, you have to swear an oath of allegiance to the bar of the United States. And if anybody will read that sworn oath that they agree to operate under, there is no way that they can be faithful to that oath and to a client at the same time.
And remember, they can argue both sides of the case, too. So you had a public defender. All in all, how do you think you were treated under that? I mean, you're about to step in. What date are you supposed to turn yourself in?
July 22nd.
And today is, what's today, May 1?
So almost May 1.
Yeah, so you have another couple months, and you're supposed to give your life up for 10 years based on the conditions of a sentence that was basically offered by a public defender. And that public defender tried to befriend you?
Oh, yeah, he tried to make himself familiar and likable and relate to my background as much as possible.
And you were in a highly stressed situation?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have
independent advice?
Yeah, I didn't I mean, even if I wanted a second opinion, it's like I didn't really have the money to go. You know, my family's not rich. You know, I'm not. Didn't. That's the fucked up thing. They think I made like millions of dollars or something, and I wish, because now I would have been able to beat it in court. But
Yeah.
like, you know,
Well,
But today, here we are looking at Eddie, and you know he's had mega bucks, and you know I think it's fair to say financially you're stressed. But where do you think the government, in all due respect, you don't round numbers, what do you think they owe you based on what they seized? Seeds and flour.
well, if you just give average value to it, like a regular, say average avocados or
Mm-hmm.
lettuce or something, it probably would not be in and of itself all that much. Uh, the stress, the strain, the loss of property and reputation, et cetera, et cetera. The marijuana, however, I had to pay $6,000 a pound for it. There was no dispensary where I could go buy marijuana. I had to buy it off the black market. That's how I ended up starting growing.
And you had how many patients?
At one time, we had somewhere between 25 and 2,900.
So this was a medical necessity for them.
Well, yeah, of course it was. The judge said when she sentenced me, the prosecutors and probation wanted her to find the fuck out of me. And she flat told them, she said, no, you guys been doing this 5 years, and you haven't shown me where this man made 1 penny off of anything.
Awesome.
In fact, just the opposite. And she sentenced me to the bare minimum.
Now you never made a secret of what you were doing. You reached out to the district attorneys and
Well, I sent people letters the first every year.
assuming that if they didn't respond, you were legal.
Yeah, and none of them ever returned them
I see.
or replied. The sheriff actually did return it several times unopened. So, it was, I don't know.
I got to tell you, Eddie, the more I get to know you and what I've known of you, I cannot tell you how much this community owes you a debt of gratitude and respect. Dennis Perone was a dear friend of mine, and in his orchestration and architecture of Prop 215 brought cannabis to the United States. But it's people like you. What did Dennis have to say about you and your personality?
God, I really don't know.
No, he said you were one fearless motherfucker.
Well, yeah, there's that, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Dennis and I, we loved each other very, very much.
And what was originally a problem for him, I know he got shot and he was arrested and shut down and everything else, but near towards the end of his life, he was given honorariums by the city of San Francisco. There was a Dennis Perone Day. So life changes.
Yeah.
And what was once illegal becomes legal.
Exactly.
And that's where I come to Matthew Hutchins. And folks, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
I'm taking a young man like this who's nervous, he's scared, he doesn't know what the future holds, but he knows that the way he was treated was not judicial, it was not fair, it was not unbiased. And when you hear a story of...
and more importantly than what happens to me or whatever, is what people will be able to do afterwards, because it's the amount of harm that the substances cause, which is negligible if it exists at all, is just so far out of whack with the penalties that they give. It's like I've seen cases where people in the Midwest who are operating with gangs and selling fentanyl are getting 2 and 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's just like they need to stop and look at the research,
or at least challenge these kinds of charges to
Yeah.
the extent that you just don't roll over, wouldn't you say?
Look at it this way. I normally keep my politics and my religion pretty muchly to myself. I don't really give a shit who you're screwing or what you eat or who you pray to. That's your business. But, you see these guys out there thinking that they know what's best for everybody, and that if we don't do it their way, it's going to fail completely. And yet, I look around and I see all this wealth in the industry, but I also see a lot of people losing their asses. See a lot of people going under and going broke.
Even the licensed people.
Well, the people that were
and
licensed.
that
Yeah.
gets back to what I was alluding to earlier. You know, you ask what was the best thing the young people can do. Educate yourself. If you don't know why Geronimo led that cavalry patrol down that narrow canyon with them 200-foot high walls, if you'd understand why he stacked up the boulders and the logs, if you don't understand why he blocked the other end of it, guess what's going to happen to you, you dumb son of a bitch?
History will repeat itself.
You betcha.
Matthew, what did you get a degree from? UCSC, that's University of California, Santa Cruz.
Yeah, that's correct.
What's your degree in?
Well, it's in history.
There you go. You know, he's a personable young man. He's articulate. He's going to have a little tough stretch here. He has options. We won't go into that here. We're exploring them. But at the end of the day, history repeats itself. And guys like Eddy are here to tell you there's a bridge. Today, you're not even being charged with the cannabis that Eddy did 10 years for. Yeah. Did you actually do 10 years, Eddy?
I did a total of 8 years, 6 months, and about 2 weeks in custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
And you got out, what, about 4 years ago?
3 years ago, this last 6th of December.
Okay.
4 years to 6th of December this year.
And he was on probation for 2 years and recently got off that just last year.
Yeah, we just got off probation.
All right. No conditions?
He couldn't even stand next to a cannabis plant.
Is that
speak
right?
about
Well, there were
cannabis.
conditions.
Oh,
Okay.
there was ridiculous conditions.
Oh, I couldn't do anything.
Couldn't even speak about cannabis?
Well,
Yeah.
they were afraid of him, so they shut him up.
Yeah, and you are a voice that represents a problem for control, tax, and regulate. I mean, obviously. We all owe Eddy a debt of gratitude and all of the activists that we stand on their shoulders today. But in closing, Eddy, what would you like to tell everybody in terms of how you feel and your outlook on life? And what, if anything, can be done about Prop 64? What do you recommend?
Well, again, educate yourself. Know the history of the plant. Know the history of the people that made it an issue and why they were successful in getting to where they got. And understand why you're able to do what you're able to do. If you understand that, then you're going to have a much better chance of being successful at any level of life, not just in cannabis. And, you know, I used to tell people when I first started lecturing, I used to say one of the most important things is don't get arrested for felonious stupidity. And they'd say, what's felonious stupidity? And I'd say, all right, if you've ever done any of this, raise your hand. I said, have you ever had a closet full of unregistered, fully alarmed, multi-load
Firearms.
bullet
Clips?
dispensers, clips,
Mm-hmm.
and showing it to your neighbor? I look around, no hands go up. I said, have you ever filled up your garage with brand new, still in the box, stolen equipment, electronics equipment, and open the front door and just let it, you know, people drive by and look at it? Nobody raises their hand. I says, that's a couple of felonious examples of felonious stupidity.
Which can have criminal repercussions.
Which can have criminal repercussions. And then I said, oh, but there's one more thing. And they all looked at me and I said, again, if you've if you're guilty of this, raise your hand. I said, okay. I said, how many of you have taken your mother-in-law, your mother, the kid that lives next door, the mailman, and anybody fucking else that you think would be impressed with your dumbass talent and show them your fucking grow? Everybody in the room went.
You reminded me of something there, and I don't want to cut you off, so if you're not done.
Well, go ahead.
Well, it's like I'll do a seminar, and I've done a number of podcasts and stuff, and I'm starting to get a little more notoriety based on, like, just show what we gave Eddy and Sandra. It's our little gift, Justice Lost, we call it, Judges Protecting Judges. And the fact is, unless we call out the judiciary when it's not acting in our best interest, then they're going to continue to do this.
Yeah.
And when it goes to the profits and the money that's being made in licensed cannabis today, the biggest problem I have when I would do, a group presentation, I would ask for a show of hands. How many people in this room have ever grown a plant?
Yeah.
How many have ever grown cannabis? No hands will go up.
None.
They're all there for the money.
Well,
And
see, that's
the
one
other
other
thing,
thing
yeah.
that really actually makes me very unique. Jack Rear couldn't grow pot. Dennis Perone couldn't grow pot. Almost everybody in the industry,
relied on somebody else to grow it.
Yeah.
well, that not necessarily so much, but they all had like a specialty. Dennis's specialty, if you will, was in opening the shops and organizing the gay community to give us the strength to fight the fight.
With Brownie Mary and many other activists.
Yes,
Yeah.
God bless her.
God bless her.
And then, of course, Jack, he fought them legislatively
Uh-huh.
and was very instrumental in activism.
That's Jack Harrow right over your head.
Yes, it is. And then you've got other people like Valerie Corral, who is a marvelous activist and a wonderful grower in her own right. But not anybody, nobody else.
Well, I was growing in '97, and I
Did.
got busted in '97 for growing.
So you faced some of these same
I was
ordeals.
looking at 10 years myself.
Is that right? We'll get to you in a second. Let's. So Valerie, and what were you saying about Valerie? Sorry.
What I was saying was that nobody then and nobody now did it all
All right.
but me.
Were you involved in extractions too?
I was involved in everything.
Yep.
I brought the first set of isolator bags were brought into this country by me. They were given to me by Mila and her son personally. I helped him work on the original prototype of their commercial tumble wheel.
What extraction technique was that? Ethyl alcohol or CO2?
It's ice water
Oh, really?
ash.
Okay.
Uh,
What about for distillate? Did you get involved in that at all?
well, yeah, but just barely. You got to understand. I brought that first set of ice water bags into this country. It was 6 years later, before anybody knew what isolator meant. This shit don't happen overnight, kid.
No.
Right?
And now they're putting regulations on it, which they don't always understand what that represents.
No, but the point is that, I lost track.
Well,
of what I was
the
saying.
isolated bags and
But
today's
you were doing
distillate.
it all, baby.
You were
the
doing
one-
everything.
You were the one doing it all.
And that basically is what set me apart.
But you never really got involved in distillate then.
Yeah, I did. But
Finally,
again,
okay.
it's a delayed relax.
Sure.
How do you think we figured out isolator?
Yeah.
It took years to get the isolator concept. Once we got to where we were able to isolate the THC, it took years for people to figure out what the fuck do you do with this shit.
Yeah. And-
Yeah, I think people probably originally started by doing a very simple extraction in the early days, something like you would use for plants and herbs, some kind of a very simple extraction.
Well, it's how we got Rick Simpson oil, RSO.
Well, the RSO was used with alcohol, which is very different. I'm talking in the original origins. I'm imagining steam probably was like one of the first things that people would use, just like you would get an essential oil from a lavender plant.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I imagine it would go into the alcohol and, the further stages as people eventually experimented and developed different ways to develop.
So what's necessarily new isn't necessarily new. I mean, we have a craze for vape pens and the cutting of the essential oil. So it's in its
I personally
isolated
think the plant
form.
in its purest form. I'd rather not have any alcohol going into Eddy's system because it's hard on his kidneys. And I know, luckily, the people that make the RSO are people that are very reliable, so we can trust it.
But I was going back to the vapes. I mean, there's cuts in this vapes. There's medium chain triglycerides.
Stuff,
and it's all to make up the volume and
the
maybe a
glycerides,
terpene presence that's not there in nature.
Yeah, well, they add stuff now that shouldn't be added. Like I said, I believe in the purest form.
Which leads me to a question that I've always wanted to ask Dennis, and unfortunately he's no longer with us. Back when Prop 215 was the law of the land, you could not get tested cannabis to see what heavy metals and insecticides, fungicides, and pesticides might be still in that flower. But today, with the laws and regulations, we were told back under 215 that the government couldn't enforce or put standards and thresholds that would protect the patient. Well, today, under for-profit recreational, those standards are there, and it's really, really hard for a grower to do anything that won't pass those tests and bring it to market. So why is it that the medical cannabis patient wasn't important enough to have that, and under for-profit they can?
Wait, I gotta say this. Wait, let me just
because let me say this.
Go first.
And this is the key, the heart of why I disagree so strongly with 64. Because it takes it out of the small guy's ability to operate and keep what is now an industry a community.
Yep.
That is how a bunch of little guys like me kick the shit out of a bunch of big guys.
That's been fractured, hasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, it's been fractured, but we learned from our mistakes and we stuck together.
So what do you think undoes it? The temporary restraining order on 64, for example, that there are some judicial activities when the legislative and executive branch fails us. And Dennis's response to me, I'll never forget in our last conversation, is that we have to beat them in a court of law. So the people that I admire and respect, I happen to be sitting in a room with some of them now. What do you think we have to do? Do we have to undo 64?
A new initiative.
Can it be found a way to work within it? What do you think?
I'll tell you the truth, there's nothing to be done. Until we straighten out our entire judicial system.
I agree.
And our entire policing
asset
process.
Forfeiture, helicopters flying over our properties.
I can talk about this till I do drop dead. And we'll never come up with anything.
And that's the way they'd have it.
And that's the way they want it. People have asked me for years, why is marijuana illegal? And the truth of the matter is it's illegal simply because it makes you question authority.
Yep.
You sit down and have a shot of whiskey at a table full of guys on a Friday night, and you get drunk, and one of them says, let's go out and hang out some black man. Well, the next thing you know, you got a pickup load full of guys driving around to see if they can hang a black man.
Ricky?
You take the same group of men, put them in the same room with no booze, absolutely none at all in their system, and you get them all stoned, and when one of them screws up and says something stupid like, well, let's go hang somebody, the other 7 or 8 people at that table that have been smoking pot with him are all going to go, what the fuck did you just say? And that is it at the heart of this.
Your point is that you question authority. So you question your
It
medical
makes you
advice.
question authority.
Right.
You don't buy the bullshit when you're stoned.
And that goes to medical too. I mean, there's an opiate crisis in the United States.
Well, it goes to everything.
So when they're saying that cannabis is a gateway drug, that's completely mischaracterized.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen the statistics in states that the legal cannabis opiate, it drops by a significant
Indeed,
margin.
we've seen that. And now there are some states that have legalized psilocybin because it has been shown a clinical success
California's one of
in
them.
PTSD. Not quite yet. We're there. We're on the cusp.
Already illegal in
Santa
San
Cruz,
Jose.
Oakland.
Oh, there are some counties.
Yeah, counties.
Yeah,
certain
no,
Oh,
that's
okay.
what I'm saying. It
Oh,
is legal
well, then
in
you've
the
already
state.
got arguments, young man.
We'll see.
Because these are subjective and discretionary decisions that they prosecute on. So, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving you legal advice, but let's face it. This is something that you have to visit. This is your life we're talking about, and you're the next generation of activists, Matthew, whether you know it or not. You're just being here proves that. So let me ask you to go back to that testing.
Yes, please.
That's an area that I have
Very important.
particular problems with.
Well, please don't, because back before the days of 64, when Prop 215 was at its glory, my friend Carlos had a basically 18-acre area where he was growing, and we tested all of our product before we sold it to patients or dispensaries. And most of the people who actually had co-ops were doing testing.
But will the lab sometimes
Yeah.
skew those results?
No, you had good labs. They had no reason to skew it.
Right.
Now they have a reason to skew it.
Bingo.
They didn't have a reason to skew it
But
back then.
Sandra, there were no thresholds under 215. So
Here's the
Well, yeah,
point.
but
If you
there's no
took
thresholds under anything.
Here-
64, there are no.
Let me finish.
How many?
So if you
How many
want,
times a year do you have somebody say, so and so is recalling this,
yeah,
and it's broccoli, or lettuce, or cucumbers, or cauliflower? The guy selling the shit obviously did not want to have to go to the cost of shipping it out there, getting the money, getting the bills and everything done. He had no intention when he did that of ever going back out there and saying, here's your money. Oh, and tell them people, their family that died, I'll get them something later. That wasn't their intention. Their intention was to make a quality product to sell to people
That you would take.
that you would use, you would take.
Right.
And that's what the whole corporate nature is to make a product that you can resell, get repeat customers, and get a substantial income on an ongoing basis.
Right.
okay.
So where do we stand today then?
Well, let me
yeah, go back to
finish what
that.
I
Yes.
was trying to say.
Please.
So we did the testing, and a lot of the co-ops were doing testing in those days. And if you tried to sell some of your product, your excess cannabis medicine, which was legal to sell back then, to a dispensary, the dispensary would look at your test, and if you didn't have a test, they wouldn't even take your product.
But you were self-policing. So
yes, we were,
yeah.
and that was beautiful.
I couldn't disagree with that.
So on top of all of that, a lot of these farms that were legal and doing all of this self-policing are now what's called the illegal market.
The black market.
Yeah, the black market. Because basically all of these farms that were like my friend's farm, had 16 acres, whatnot, are now illegal because, they require 20 acres now, or now we require this and that, and we want $20,000 here and a $6,000 fee for environmental testing, and we,
There's a lot of obstacles to
to the
overcome.
point where only the
again-
wealthy can succeed. So therefore, let me just finish real quick. So my point is that they're letting all these huge farms grow when people like my friends were growing organically. They should test on runoff. They should test the farms on if they're harming the environment or being positive to the environment.
Well, that's one good thing about 64. It does have CEQA, which is a mini environmental impact report. But the downside of that is there's a lot of what we call provisional licenses. That means provisionally they're operating, but anytime the Bureau of Cannabis Control wants to revoke that license, they can. And as an agreement to being a licensee, that is not given due process. If they're revoked, that decision is final. So
there's a lot of that kind of stuff going
Yeah.
on, and 64 goes beyond itself. For years, there's ramifications with rules that come into play years later with money allocated to this or that or whatnot. It's a horrible puzzle that just needs to be dismantled. Now, all the pages to 64 weren't printed in the California Voters Handbook,
another good point.
which I hear people who've passed away telling me in my ear.
Go back to that. Revisit that.
That needs to be something that really needs to be revisited. Not all the pages were printed. People didn't know what they were voting on, and as Californians, we should know what we're voting on before we're voting on it.
Yep, and that is part of our law and our Constitution.
So that was denied the people of California. We didn't know what we were voting for.
Did anybody challenge that?
No.
No. So to any lawyers out there listening into this, I think what the message is today is people have to educate themselves and understand that what we're living on today is a result of what happened to us judicially and legislatively from years gone past. And unless you educate yourself, it's going to be an ongoing repetition. That train will go so far from the station, you'll never know it was there.
And don't just read the title of the document. Read the 4th and 5th and 6th line, and then read the whole thing to the end. And
not in one fell sweep. You got to kind of take it in chunks and then come back and revisit it and say, does this really work?
If it takes you a month to read it,
exactly.
Do it. Or put it on autoplay for your computer to read it for you.
Does today's generation with their iPhones and everything else, Matthew, are we really taking and getting involved in the political process? Are we reading these things, or is there just too much of it?
Well, I mean, one thing that I noticed that's happening is that people are the same as they've always been, but there's definitely a very addictive nature to electronics that is it's just like the dopamine. And honestly, it's kind of one of the sad things about it is one of the aspects I was looking forward to in prison was not having a cell phone, not having electronics, and not having access to the internet.
What makes you think you won't have a cell phone in prison?
Well, I wouldn't buy one.
Eddie's here to tell you that's not going to be a problem.
That's a level 100 shot. They'll send me to a higher security facility for that one.
Listen, kid.
Yeah, you don't know until you're in it. But
you learn about being in prison: never carry your own shit. Jesus Christ.
So you wouldn't undo anything in your life. Who still inspires you today? I mean, who in the past were the people that you could point to, possibly Jack or others, that inspired you to become the Eddy Lepp we have before us?
I think what truly inspired me to be the Eddy Lepp I am today is love. My love of the Creator as I understand Him. Love of my fellow man.
And you grew up in the 60s and 70s, and there was a lot of peace and love going there. But
Well,
it was
yeah,
tumultuous
I
times, too.
am a child of the 60s.
Yeah.
And, you know...
You saw Kent State. You saw a lot of problems.
Yes, I did. I never forget, I went to a what do you call it? A
festival or?
Not a convention, but a congregation, I guess, on the Capitol steps in Boise, Idaho.
Demonstration?
When George Wallace was running for president. And he was out there, you know, spewing forth his racist bullshit. And it's funny because I never looked at myself as a racist. But all of this stuff that's been coming up, I've had to really reflect and really look at myself. And so I'm going to tell this story, even though I'm very ashamed of it. But I feel that I have to be honest because it's the way things were. And I think if people understood that, there might be a quicker road to healing and a quicker road to this country truly getting back together.
Let's hear it. That's what we need.
And, you know, when I was a young man and I was growing up, I grew up in Reno. And there were two black men in my life. Both of them were boot blacks for my father. One's name was Joe, who influenced my life from the time I was about born, I guess, till I was about 8 or 10 when he passed away. And then Arthur was my muse, my guide, my daddy in his own way, till I was about 18 or 19, and then I ended up going in the military.
Did you see race then, growing up? Did you see them as black men?
I didn't see them as any color of man.
Bingo.
But I remember at the George Wallace rally, I used the N-word.
And were you ashamed of that?
I am now, but when I tell you in the retrospect how I used it,
How did you use it?
perhaps you'll understand.
Yes.
I said, I screamed out, Wallace, you hating, no good, racist son of a bitch. And there were 3 or 4 little old blue-haired ladies. And those of you that are my age truly know what I mean.
That was a popular hair color.
She turned around and cracked me upside the head with a goddamn purse, about knocked me out.
Don't mess with them blue-haired old ladies.
And that's what I'm telling you now. This just happened to me in the last couple days. And I really realized that although I honestly believe, and I still believe, I'm not a racist and never have been, but I practiced racist behavior, not knowingly, but because that's what was accepted at that time. It's like the Mormon church would not allow black people. The only way a Negro would get into heaven with a Mormon is as his slave.
Yeah, and I believe what you're saying is that we have segregation, but people tend to segregate anyway. You tend to be around people that are like you.
Well, yeah, and that's all well and good.
But that's not
I
discrimination.
don't want to be around somebody that's an asshole.
Right, no matter what color their skin.
No, but
Well, obviously that's not the case with him because he married me.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you both can have something you could sling at each other, but you found each other and late in life.
Well, I'm Hispanic. I speak Spanish. My family's from Central America,
And you're here in Clearlake, and I got to tell you, this is the first time I've ever been here, and if nobody's been to Clearlake listening, please, you got to make a point of it. It's absolutely God's country.
Yeah.
How many years have you lived here?
I bought this house in 2011.
And Eddie,
I came up here as a child water skiing on this lake. And now it's not quite as clean and quite as full. But
it looked a little murky. What is?
it's pretty bad.
Are we losing water? I guess that's
It's
another whole
really,
conversation.
Really shallow right now. We're in a drought.
what it is, that water, the ambient depth of that lake's about 35 feet. And if you took a big clear plastic tube and sealed one and shoved it down in the lake and went down to the bottom of that tube with a camera, you could look and you could see it's clear across the lake.
Wow.
It's crystal clear.
At depth.
At any depth.
Because at the top it looked pretty brown.
It's not. It's crystal clear.
Okay.
What that is algae.
Oh,
This is one of the healthiest lakes in the world.
okay.
But it's because all of the orchards, the walnuts and the pears,
The fertilizers.
and now the vineyards, the runoff, which gets back to what Sandy alluded to earlier about beneficial runoff. What once was truly a lake as clear as Tahoe now looks muddy.
Yep.
Even though the water itself truly is crystal clear, 3, 4, 5 feet deep. If you go out in a boat, you can see it easy.
Yep.
You know, it's
Well,
not the.
So the
it's-
algae forms to save the microbiology that's living under the lake, because what happens is the lake gets so warm because it's so shallow that it creates the algae so that the life that's within the lake doesn't die of heat.
And are you seeing this manifest itself in muddy water more today than in years past?
Yes,
No,
because of the
Because again, it's
runoff
not
of dirty,
muddy
bad
water.
runoff.
I know. So it's year in, year out, it's gotten worse.
Yeah, more vineyards, more.
Well, no, actually, it's not getting worse. That's the point.
Okay.
They cut down all of the walnut orchards. They cut down all of the pear orchards. And there are restrictions on the vineyards as to how much nitrogen and whatever they can put into the ground. There's a rate that they have to go at so that by the time it reaches the water table, it's dissipated to a point that it won't affect the algae growth by more than a certain small percentage.
I see. So it is being monitored and managed.
But, you know,
Yeah, but we could monitor and manage bad runoff, or we could mandate and create good runoff that actually is beneficial to the lake and creates good biology for the lake by using probiotic farming techniques.
And that's a work in progress. I agree. So
Well-
as medical or cannabis in general now, as recreational medical goes, a lot of those grows are being mandated to be done indoors. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, is that environmentally conscious? Is it sustainable? Is the water even there for all these cannabis licenses that are being issued? Are you involved in? Do you have an opinion on that?
I'll put it this way. I've had a lot of people tell me they put their plants under 24-hour light,
For veg.
and I'll tell them the same thing that I'll tell you now. You show me any place on the earth where the sunlight is sufficient 24 hours a day to produce enough lumens to ensure the growth of a marijuana plant, and I will kiss your fucking ass in front of the White House. You're not God.
And you were all outdoor. And were you hoop houses?
No, I wasn't. I've done everything.
Okay.
But the point I'm making here is you're not God.
Yep.
It's not up to you how much light that plant should get or shouldn't get. I mean, we know what its needs are.
And ideally, you can provide that indoors.
Yes, ideally you can provide that. But the point is if you could have a huge outdoor grow where the wind didn't really hit it, it got a breeze but not a wind, where it got a sprinkle of mist but it didn't get hit with rain, you know what I mean?
I do.
Then it'd be different.
And these are varying conditions that a plant would see in nature.
I mean, it'd be very expensive to do this, I know, because I've done it.
Sure.
But the other side of that is that right now the biggest threat to the world is carbon and our carbon footprint. Hemp is the one product in the world that doesn't leave behind a carbon footprint.
It sequesters it.
And it sequesters it, correct,
And so,
as it
you know,
remediates.
all I can say is live your life by the truth.
Yep.
No lies in or out. Respect all. Hurt none. Love one another.
And those are powerful words to live by, folks. And we really want to thank Eddy, Matthew here. Matthew, thank you, and hopefully everything will come through for you. You still got opportunities here. And Sandra, you know, it's been a blessing to have the introduction to meet you all out here and get your message out. So,
Thank you.
all right, guys, enjoy.
Peace out.